Welcome folks. I'm going to do this very quickly because it's actually a very large topic, and we would have to look into some of the history of what led up to Freud, the early mesmerists, and then the people who called themselves hypnotists, essentially after Braid and other people began to use that word. And then that would enable us to understand where Freud was coming from and where other people who distanced themselves from Freud's ideas took things, hypnosis, in a different direction. And because it's so large, and this is a short talk, I'm going to take the main points, condense it, and we can always do it in more depth at another time. And we do go into this in our Advanced Analytical Hypnotherapy course in more depth. So, well, there are a lot of overlaps and an awful lot of differences between psychoanalysis and hypnotherapy. Differences in theories and differences in methodology. Now, one of the things that's characterized psychoanalysis over the years is that there's a great deal of intellectual discussion and theorizing, as well as analysis of dreams in the Freudian way of analyzing dreams. And of course, we always have to bear in mind that neo-Freudians have moved things on a lot since Freud's time to incorporate much more than the sexual etiology of neurosis and those ideas about sex being involved in so many kinds of problems, and the disruption and interference of family dynamics due particularly to the sexual dynamics under the surface. So that leads, and I don't want to oversimplify Freud's ideas and do him injustice, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to some simple ideas he had that were the basis of Freudian theories of the unconscious and the id, and how these impact then on our functioning in life. So there is that great intellectual element to it. Theorizing, which you put onto the client and interpret their experiences, in the therapy setting in between sessions, and then they're supposed to live up to those diagnoses and theories. So the intellectual side is one aspect. By making what is unconscious conscious, we resolve the problems, according to Freud. That's the major part of the therapy. Well, that's not true. Intellectual understanding of different levels and forms gives a starting point for therapy, but very incomplete. It doesn't take us to the deeper roots, the deepest levels and experiences of the mind where the problems are lodged, and so on. So that's one part. Then we had in the development of Freud's ideas the experience with emotional catharsis. Breuer's cathartic method, one of Freud's colleagues, and he noticed that when people released the emotion, they felt better. Of course, that's a part of therapy too, and getting in touch with the beliefs and ideas that drive those emotions, of course, we would say, is a lot more of the real therapy than just releasing the emotional. It's like the steam coming out of the boiler. We don't want to just be dealing with the steam. So when we're dealing with the emotional energies, we deal with them in a different way, of course. We deal with the intellectual understanding in hypnotherapy as well. We deal with the emotional understanding, and we deal with these deep beliefs and the deeper subconscious levels of the mind. And so what has become developed over the years is called hypnoanalysis, and then advanced analytical hypnotherapy, as we teach it in our classes, to distinguish it from the rather psychoanalytic, psychodynamic forms of analytical hypnotherapy that existed in the past. But great workers in the field such as Dave Ellman, and of course Gil Boyne, who studied many aspects of psychotherapy, forms of psychotherapy and psychiatric theories and so on, and psychology, as well as being a very experienced and accomplished hypnotist with a great range of abilities and skills. He helped develop Transforming Therapy, which is the label under which we put our Advanced Analytical Hypnotherapy. We still keep developing and evolving the work of Gil Boyne and other people that feed into it, of course. So at the time of Freud, there were people questioning and rejecting Freud's ideas. One very famous man at the time, Pierre Janet, is very influential in the work that we do. And he was a student of Charcot, as was Freud. They both learned hypnosis together under Charcot. Now, Freud abandoned hypnosis for various reasons, and we could write a book on that on its own. And would be important to understand how psychoanalysis developed and how hypnotherapy developed, and the major differences between them. Janet had the understanding that there were parts of the mind occupied by a fixed idea, the idée fixe, where an idea is lodged in the mind and then a certain amount of emotional energy coalesces around it. And at that deep feeling-based belief, the fixed idea, the belief or idea that's implanted there at a deep emotional level is to a large extent impervious to rational, conscious, logical analysis and thinking. In terms of making any changes to it, we can just think about it, but it doesn't change the way we really understand and feel it. We have intellectual understanding, intellectual knowledge, and emotional knowledge, emotional understanding, and it's quite different. And so you could talk and think about it all the time for years and years in therapy without making that much impression on these very powerful fixed ideas, as they are in some cases. Our fixed ideas may be very more mild ones in some cases. I need to eat chocolate because it makes me feel better. That becomes a fixed belief, fixed idea. I can't get to feel good enough without that. But sometimes they're very much the feelings of lack of self-love. The fixed ideas drive powerful emotional energy of that kind. So there are big differences in the theories and practices. And Janet and other people's work led to what was called then ego state therapy. And these therapies work on the idea that these split off parts of our consciousness are almost like ego states. Well, they certainly have a fixed idea. That out of that comes scripts, narratives, whole ideas about ourselves and the world around us, kind of like templates which guide our experience of the world and our interpretation of the world. And these can be very powerful and operate almost independently. So we're saying one thing and doing another. And we hardly know ourselves in some cases when these are really in conflict with each other. So therapy is to bring these to surface level, yes, but deal with them at each level. We must uncover a lot about them, so we have methods in analytical hypnotherapy for doing that. Instead of talking and speculating about what might be deep down in the mind, right, that's just theorizing and fitting the client into the theory. We go on that journey with hypnosis to where it's lodged, as Janet would say. Do the therapy where it really is, at that part of the mind, with the tools, the powers of the mind that exist at that level. The emotional understanding must be changed far more than the rational, logical understanding. And then at the core, the fixed idea, the belief that drives the emotion, that fixed idea needs to be changed to healthier, more functional, appropriate messages and ideas and beliefs in the mind. And hypnotherapy enables us to do this, which cannot be achieved to the same extent, anything like the same extent in my view, with many of the more intellectual forms of cognitive therapy. They can be helpful and they're a part of hypnotherapy as well, but they don't contain the power of very deep work in the subconscious that hypnosis can achieve. Very quickly, just bring up one or 2 points about Freud's abandonment of hypnosis. He said it was unreliable, takes too long, but of course we know he wasn't that knowledgeable about it in the way we are now. He also had a speech impediment, so it's difficult for him to talk very efficiently with the client and giving good suggestions. A lot about the art of suggestion giving hadn't really yet been fully developed, and he felt as it was short-term often its effects, but that would be often because of poor programming and not dealing with underlying fixed ideas. There's no reason to reject hypnosis. The tool he used instead of hypnosis to get some level of uncovering of what's in the subconscious was free association, and that's a far less efficient, far weaker method. It doesn't compare at all really with real hypnosis. So he also had other ideas, of course, based on his own personality. He constantly wanted to fit the idea of sex on the problem, and as we know, there are many other things besides sex that can lead to negative fixed ideas, and we have to deal with those in the therapy. Freud, because he had a certain egotistical element to his own theorizing, that he was uncovering the human mind in its deepest nature, his ego got the better of him. He was something of a pioneer in certain ways, although others had probed the depths of the mind in different ways in previous years and in previous cultures and centuries, of course, and come to very different conclusions. But Freud talked at people. He wanted them to fit the theory, because this was his pet project, the theories about the human mind, instead of tailoring suggestions to the needs of the client and dealing with their issues. If you can't get them into a trance because you don't know enough about what you're doing, or it's taking too long, you need to improve your techniques rather than throwing away the method. And so there were other things about it, about hypnosis, that he didn't understand at the time, which we now understand so much more. And instead of saying people can't be hypnotized, you're a poor subject, good hypnotists know there's ways around that, and helping people overcome their baggage that may be getting in the way. So we use hypnosis in a way that Freud never understood, and we deal with the subconscious, with what comes up, rather than the sexual etiology of the neurosis. And we also know a lot more about fixed ideas and ego states, and we have so much more now that's been developed since the time of Freud. So hypnotherapy is really the great advance in therapy. It's given rise to the psychotherapies and the counseling methods and all the fragmentation development back from the early days of Freud, who was of course dealing with the work of Braid and Mesmer and other people's work as well. So it's built on many people's work over 200 years now. And so we know how to help people with problems, with issues, and providing, and we're not claiming magic cures. We're not saying it's all simple in every case, far from it. We have to build therapeutic relationships, stimulate readiness for change. We have to work on ourselves to develop the personal traits and qualities of an effective therapist. We must learn many things about the human mind and how problems can develop and how they can be helped. And that's what hypnotherapy is, a very comprehensive, powerful, complete method. And so anybody who learns hypnotherapy properly, I'm not talking about a bit of hypnoidal relaxation and a few suggestions, anybody who learns it properly can do astonishingly important, powerful work to help clients. And as long as the readiness for change is there, and commitment to change, and taking responsibility on the part of the client, with a good therapist, marvelous results can be achieved. And that's been my experience, and those who worked with deep hypnotherapy have also found the same thing. So thank you very much for listening and watching.